Hi everybody, welcome to Saturday Live at the Backyard Bird Center. Today we're talking about the feature that makes birds birds. The one thing that for sure that birds have that no other type of animal has on the planet, and that are the feathers. And feathers are incredible. They are super strong, they're highly varied, they're very specialized, they're very lightweight, they do many functions in a bird's lives. But before I get started, there's two things I want to make sure that I cover really quickly, and that is one, you cannot possess feathers. And now that's not 100%. Now you can have a starling feather or a sparrow feather or a pigeon feather, those birds that aren't protected, or of course you can have feathers of ducks that you've shot during illegal hunting seasons and game birds, things like that. But as far as all other feathers like cardinal feathers and blue jay feathers and some you're going to be seeing here today, you cannot legally possess those. And that goes as far as even picking one up off the ground and, oh, look at this, it's a cardinal feather, and sticking it in your field guide and keeping it. Technically, legally, that is illegal, and you could face a fine for that. And why is that? Is because back when birds needed protection, back at the turn of the last century, when hunting was terrible and wiping out species of birds just for their feathers, the big story, the origin of the Audubon Society was because of feathers and ladies' caps were the big fashion statement back then. And so what they did, they tried to pass law that said, you can't kill these birds. Well, what happened is these feathers kept showing up in ladies' caps, and whenever they tried to arrest the gentleman who sold the feathers, he would simply use the defense of, oh, I just found that feather laying on the ground. I didn't kill the bird to get that feather. So they had to take the law further, and not only can you not kill the birds, but you cannot possess any part of a bird. That includes their feathers. Now, is there a conservation agent out there that'll arrest a 4-year-old for picking up and keeping a cardinal feather? No, probably not. But just to let you know that it is illegal, and there's a reason for that. Birds need protecting, and so that's why the law had to go that direction. Now, how do I have the feathers that I'm going to be using today in the program? These are all loaned to me by my former employer, the Martha Lafitte Thompson Nature Sanctuary over in Liberty, Missouri, and I'll put a link to their website, naturesanctuary.com, wonderful facility, education facility. They legally can possess these feathers because they are an education institution, and they teach people and they protect birds by their passing on lots of knowledge. And so these are on loan for me. They'll be right back to the Nature Center. Probably on Monday I'll get the box back to them, but I really want to thank them for letting me use these during the program today. So there is the legal stuff and the thankful stuff. So feathers. How did feathers begin? What is the evolution of feathers? Well, we're finding out more and more that more dinosaurs had feathers than we ever thought before, and we're finding that they are much older than we thought. That they were the covering on dinosaurs. Now, there's still a lot of debate as to the origin of feathers and what the purpose was. It's easy to assume that they were for warmth. Dinosaurs are cold-blooded creatures, and the warmth was so important to them, that maybe that is why the bristly things started evolving, modified scales started changing, and it became more fluffy. Others think that it may have been for attraction. They showed off. The color and things made them stand out against other dinosaurs, and so they would attract a mate and things like that. So. But that we know feathers go a lot further back than we originally thought, and we know that birds evolved from dinosaurs, and so that all links together. What are feathers made of? Well, they're a beta keratin, which is basically your fingernails, same material that make up your fingernails. So they're modified scales per se in that sense, and there are lots of different kinds, and they all have lots of different functions in it to a bird. Now this is, and we're trying to do this so that you can see better against this white background, and we're going to be playing with the camera angle for you to hopefully that you can see this better. In the bird world, there are 7 different kinds of feathers. There are wing feathers or flight feathers. There are tail feathers. There are body covering feathers known as contour feathers. And then there are the warmth feathers of the down feathers, the real fluffy part of a feather that you usually don't see except on really baby birds. That's the first feathers that they get, and usually they're white and fluffy. And then there are feathers called semi-plumes, which are part down and part decoration. So, and we see those a lot in the breast and things on birds. And whenever a female is creating a brood patch, so that she can sit on eggs and keep them warm, she'll pull a lot of these semi-plume feathers out and also down feathers so that her skin will touch the eggs. That way she's keeping them warm. So there's lots of different kinds of feathers, and some of them are incredible structures. The last two I don't have on here are the really specialized feathers, and those are the phyloplume feathers, which on nightjars, which are like whippoorwills and chuck-will's widows, those are basically whiskers on those in that form. And then there's bristle feathers, which are really just the center thread, the barb of the feather in the middle, the stem. Those are specialized feathers mainly on the face of birds. Like in woodpeckers, they have them across their nostrils so that whenever they're hammering on wood, chips don't fall down in their nose. So there's lots of specialization in that. But the ones that we're most familiar with, we're going to talk about. Oh, they're here in front of me. Here we are. Tail feathers. Tail feathers are generally straight, and they are usually very, very stiff. And the reason they're so stiff is because their function in the birds who really utilize them, you know, if you're a ground bird, if you're a quail or a meadowlark and you spend all your time on the ground, you don't have a use for a tail. So your tail feathers are usually pretty short. But if you're a bird of prey that needs to chase something, the tail is your rudder, and that's how you steer and catch a bird or catch a mouse. And then, of course, woodpeckers are a great example of needing a specialized tail feather because they use their tail feathers as a kickstand. So their woodpeckers' feathers are very strong and they're very stiff, their tail feathers, and they can use them to pry against a tree and use them as a point of anchor for hammering and stuff. So tail feathers are their own kind of feathers in birds. Now, I'm going to show, of course, on here you can see the little fluffy down at the bottom and on the other back side of it. This is from a great horned owl that was killed. And then the one that are the most famous, of course, are the wing feathers. And these, I'll put these if I can up here, the wing feathers, the long feathers, the flight feathers as we call them, and I don't want to get too technical, but they have primaries and then they have secondaries and tertiaries. Those feathers are the ones that are shaped so that they're curved a bit, and it forces the wind over the top of them, and it goes faster over the top of the feather and slower underneath, and it causes lift on each individual feather as well as the shape of the wing. So they're very, very specialized for different kind of birds. Different birds exhibit different kinds of flight. This is the great horned owl again, and I don't know how well you can see it, and Ruth's going to try to zoom in here for you, but one of the great specializations of great horned owls is, if you can see it, is all across this leading edge of this top feather. It's frayed, real frilly, and then you can see it also down on these lower feathers. But when they fly, when they flap their wings, those are mufflers. They reduce the sound of the air whooshing over the wing. You know, when you hear a big bird like a turkey take off and you hear woof, 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 owls couldn't catch food if they were noisy when they were flying, and so this enables owls to have silent flight, which is incredible. But it's a real specialization for them with their feathers. Most feathers aren't like that, so that's a great specialization. Now, when we look at a bird, the greatest percentage of the feathers that we see, especially when the wings are tucked, are what are known as contour feathers, and those are the ones that cover the body on a wing. They're called coverts up here, where and these are just smaller feathers that mainly cover the exterior of the bird. And underneath those feathers is where the white fluffy down feathers are, which are the warmth feathers. These guys are underneath, and we don't get to see those for most part. Sometimes they'll be poking out here and there outside the flight feathers, but for the most part, you don't see the down that's underneath there. What are their functions? Decoration, The males are prettier. Here's a great one that this is from a yellow shafted flicker or a northern flicker, and you can see where they get their name for their yellow shafts of the feathers, and underneath the wing you can see how yellow they are under there. Color and for bird and mate attraction can be very, very important, and feathers of course are a big part of that. But the most part, for flight, for warmth, for water resistance, the water runs off feathers very quickly. And how do they maintain these? You can see that feathers get worn, they get beat up. If you've ever seen a bird sitting on a limb, taking his bill and running it between his feathers, that's called preening. And what he's doing, or she's doing, is re-zippering the feathers. Whenever feathers fit together like zippers, and whenever those zippers get out of line, they get beat from flying through limbs, and they have to get them back together. And bird baths are so important because water is needed to help heal those feathers as well. So a lot of times you'll see them after they get out of a bird bath, you'll see them preening a lot to get those feathers back right and keep them healthy so they don't get brittle and break. And of course, if they break, then it can affect their ability to fly and things like that. So feathers are incredibly important. Now, there's one question. Oh, I got to pick this up, that I get a lot about color in feathers. And it brings up where color comes from in feathers. Now, whenever I tell people, when they look at a blue jay or an indigo bunting or an eastern bluebird, that those birds aren't truly blue, people often look at me like I'm crazy, or outwardly tell me I'm crazy. But there are no blue pigments in feathers. There are, and really there's not white pigment in feathers either, and there's very few true green pigments in feathers. The colors that we're seeing here of the blue is the refraction of light. And that is somewhat like a butterfly wing. Whenever they close, when you look and you see when the light is bending, and you're seeing the blue there. And that, if you've ever looked at an indigo bunting early in the morning, sitting up on a tree limb, it looks black until the light gets on it so it can bend that light. And so they truly do not show that blue color, which is pretty amazing. But it's true, there's no blue pigment in feathers. So a blue jay really isn't blue, but we see blue. Now, the other thing that is tricky is, of course, iridescence. And iridescence is like if you watched a male ruby-throated hummingbird looking at you, and you see his throat, and his throat looks red, but he turns his head just slightly, and all of a sudden that red is black, and that is iridescence, and that is the interaction with light and the pigment in the feather that it takes that proper angle, proper interaction to make that red show in that ruby-throated hummingbird's gorget. So colors are a fascinating thing in feathers. Feathers are a fascinating subject. So I try to make this, kind of as quick as I could, the Reader's Digest version, if you will. Someday maybe I'll do a whole class on nothing but feathers, but they're fascinating. Again, thank you, Martha Lafitte Thompson Nature Sanctuary in Liberty, for loaning me the feathers so I could do the program. And we will do more. Please send in ideas for future programs. Give us a like, give us a share. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. Until then, let's talk birds.